Software to die for. The PROMIS software scandal and how the U.S. Justice Department became software pirates in the name of national security, with Ted St. Rein. Or Teed, if you prefer. Brought to you by ToorCamp and ToorCon.org. Check them out. www.mediaarchive.com proudly presents this material. Thank you for watching. Also check out www.promisscandal.com. And so they installed this software on the HUD machine, and mysteriously HUD lost like $4.3 trillion. You don't hear about HUD anymore. HUD's out of business. They lost all their money. You know, where to go? And so that was the test run before they sold it to FinCEN and SWIFT. The equivalent in Europe is called SWIFT, and Google that term as well. And so we'll be talking about SWIFT in a second. And so but anyway, so the next step was so they did HUD as a test to see if they could extract a bunch of money and nobody would know where it went. It's like those programs that used to work at the banks, and they'd siphon off every $0.25 of interest from all the accounts and funnel it into this other account. Or they go and change their mag strip readers on the deposit slip, so when somebody go put in a $500 deposit, it would transit into another account because they had re-encoded the mag strip, you know? Same kind of thing, but in this case, you know, on a global scale. And so basically what this investigative report found, and a lot of it was kept secret, was that you know, this was the payoff for the October surprise, for keeping, you know, the Iranian hostages hostage for another 28 and a half days or whatever it was, 22 days, to keep, you know, to make sure that Reagan won the election. This was the payoff. PROMIS Software is who paid these people off that handled all that. This is what they wanted. They wanted this software. And then they all turned up dead, but that's okay. So anyway, so these guys are dead. Anson Young and Nung. This is an interesting one. He was down, I think, in Brazil somewhere or something, and he was murdered. I didn't have a photo of him. Some of these photos are very, very hard to find. It took me a month. Well, actually, it only took me like 3 days, but I've been working on the project for many months, and you know, I've got about 150 slides. We're only halfway through. How are we doing on time over there? Oh, excellent. We're exactly halfway through the tape, and we're halfway through the slides. We're on target. And so all these guys started turning up dead. And so anybody here seen this guy, Gerald Bull? He developed the rail gun, the super gun that he was supposedly sold. You know, Saddam was on our team. You know, Saddam was on our team. Osama was on. These are all made men. You know, they're all working for us. You know, until you know they become expendable, and then you know they fly Saddam out and his family out on the jet, and then they and he's living in the Bahamas, and you know who knows where everybody else is. And so all these people, you know, these real innovators started turning up dead. You know, this guy was assassinated outside of his apartment. And so then there's Bill McCoy. And Bill McCoy had heard, this isn't him, of course, this is just somebody who looks like him, maybe, sitting in his chair. He heard there was a contract out on his life, and that several people were coming to kill him. So he decided, instead of being killed, he was just going to stop taking his heart medication. And they found him dead in his chair. But right before he died, he was working on a project called Elbit. And there's all sorts of Elbits now. This is Elbit Systems, actually, no relation to the Elbit chip, of course. And it's basically, like I was talking about before, these little burst transmitters. You can see them up there on the key, for an example. And there's a little diagram and a circuitry, and here's just a couple other ones. That one up the upper right is an infrared burst transmitter. And then, of course, we just got a regular 433 megahertz, you know, transmitter. So they're very common. You know, back then they weren't as common, but you know, they're basically, you know, made a deal with Intel. You know, that's why I prefer the PowerPC Max, because you know they don't have an Intel chip in them. We'll talk about in a minute. And so that's the problem, is these Elbit chips are supposedly in all computers everywhere, and they can literally just store up every keystroke that you've made over your entire lifetime and send it in a matter of seconds to some satellite that's orbiting overhead. You know, this is the technology that exists. They can pick up, just like they can pick up what's on your screen from a van outside the, you know, from outside the thing, using the electromagnetic waves that come off your screen. You know, it's basically the same technology. And this is what PROMIS allowed them to do. You know, basically it increased their sophistication like tenfold, enough where they could start, you know, receiving signals from laptops, you know, flying overhead. Oh, and there's the flow flying receptors. Ah, however evil they are. And I should also mention another website I have, Hacker DVD. Some of the titles, in fact, they just Emmanuel Goldstein from the Hope just gave a great presentation last night. And hopefully this week coming up, I'll have them posted on hackerdvds.com. If you go to hackerdvds.com, that goes to my YouTube page where I have like a lot of different things. You could also go to freevideoarchives.com. If you go to Free Video Archives, it links to my YouTube account that's got about 300 or 400 different hacker videos, ToorCon, ShmooCon, Nauticamp. And I just wanted to thank Nauticamp for letting us film in their tent the other day. Our tent was actually blown down by the dust devil. You know you're in bad condition when somebody says it's coming this way. The last 2 times my life were in danger, I was nearly hurt out here the other day. Somebody was saying, the first time was I was sleeping in a restaurant, there's a tornado and it's headed this way. And then 2 days ago I was in there, we're getting ready to film. Actually I was supposed to go present, but then the octopus put an end to that. And so then there's a dust devil and it's headed this way. That's the last thing I heard, and it was all over from there. But go to my MySpace, Ted's Adventure with 2 Ds, TEDDS, adventure.com to check those photos and all the other photos here. So anyway, so all these people, so we have these hacker chips in all our computers. And they're put there by Intel, and the CIA, and now Google's, got its Google Gear. Anybody got Google Gears installed? I do. I don't mind.
One question about the EL chip, though. It's a versatile transmitter. It should be detectable with software radio to be able to isolate the frequency that it uses.
Yeah, well, it depends on what frequency. Yeah, you think you'd be able to detect it. And the other thing about these is it uses latent power, supposedly. It doesn't. You don't even have to have the thing plugged in. I mean, you have to have it plugged in, but the machine doesn't have to be even on.
So it's got like a capacitor or something?
Well, it just uses the latent power from the circuit. When you plug your, it's that dead power you have when you plug in. It uses that latent. It's tied into that latent power circuit.
Nice.
And so your machine could be off, in the closet, and it could be sitting there transmitting. But yeah, no, that would be, an interesting thing to do a bandwidth scan, or, now these days, it might go out over the internet. You have a packet sniffing. Who knows what's going on. But so there's this concern that another question.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're just talking about the late voltage or trip voltage. Like, I'm sure you've heard the stories of the cell phones, wiretapping, turn off the cell phone, certain Nokia phones.
Oh, not just turn them off, take the battery out of them.
Right.
Yeah. Hot on the hook, it's called. Yeah, sure, hot on the hook. And this is what PROMIS did.
Yeah.
The hot on the hook technologies. It's a perfect example. Google that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, all these people started turning up dead. Ian Spiro and his wife were killed out in California. They were involved with Riconosciuto. And this all, made the papers. It's big news back then. And so just more and more, once again, I'll have all these slides posted on my website, promiscandle.com. You can check it out. Found dead of poisoning at Spiro. Interesting. And so then there's this guy, Robert Maxwell. This was a difficult photo to find. All these people started dying around 1991, same time Casillero died, 1991. We still got audio over there? You can hear me come out of there? Check, audio? Yeah, okay. And so Robert Maxwell was found drowned in 1991 in kind of a mysterious, drowning accident, like Natalie Wood, except that one was pretty explainable. And so basically, this was the guy that helped broker PROMIS sales worldwide. He was a big publishing magnate out of London, and he helped broker sales to like hundreds of nations and all these people worldwide. And he was even investigated by the FBI for sales of PROMIS, for selling the software. We're probably like a half hour or less. But anyway, so all these people just ended up starting up dying. Anybody related to the case that were or friends of theirs or whoever knew the story or who could make connections, they just all ended up dying, and one after another, just dead. It looks like I did pull the Carradine photo out. That one will be in the thing. I blocked out the actual body, but it's interesting when you look at the Carradine photo. You'll see a red miniskirt, a red lingerie on the bed. And what's interesting, and you aren't found dead in a hotel room, hanging from a hotel room in Bangkok with, out some kind of sex involved, probably, And so there's probably some kind of other involvement there. But what's interesting is that autoerotic asphyxiation that we just heard so much about, and once again, carradinetribute.com for the video. I just met him like 4 months ago. Unbelievable, he's gone, but very interesting video. It's basically a good cap on his life. And so a lot of other people, this guy here, Jonathan Moyle is his name, and he was investigating the PROMIS Iraq connection, and he was found dead of autoerotic asphyxiation down in Santiago, down in Chile. And so, so a lot of people, associated with this is one of the ways that they, kill people, make it look like a suicide, So, and I'll go on the record to say, if I ever commit suicide, 100%, it wasn't me, man, I didn't do it. But anyway, so then there's others. Anybody know who this is? Phil Schneider. He would be another one that might have been here. He was basically charged, had a contract to help develop underground bases across the country, especially one down in out underneath supposedly the Denver International Airport. There's supposedly a big underground complex under there that can house 4, 5, 6, 10,000 people. And so he helped develop all this stuff, and talks about all this, went public. In fact, one of the conferences that I got the rights to distribute, called the Global Sciences Congress, the globalsciencescongress.com is where eventually it will end up. But I have some lectures from him. In fact, here's a string clip from that lecture where he's talking about all these, weird things and all this stuff going on, and how he helped build these bases, and this is how they were built, and this is what they did. And then, of course, he was found dead. They thought it was suicide, or I forget, it wasn't auto-afflicted, but he ended up, they didn't find it because he was swollen. After you die, you swell up and stuff. They didn't find him for a few days. I guess he lived alone. Don't live alone, anybody. That's the worst thing. But, live with roommates so they can get killed too. So they found him with piano wire, right? But they couldn't find it. When the original autopsy, they didn't find the piano wire because he was so swollen up. And they did a second autopsy, and found piano wire around his throat. And tortured. Usually they torture you for the information and then, it's over. And so some other interesting things, Jim Keith here, once again, he helped write that original octopus book, and shortly thereafter, ended up dead. Now, I should mention about this guy, it was like within about 3 to 5 months of him presenting this lecture that I have the rights to, that he ended up dead. And so that's not a good thing, but, hopefully I'll last longer. And so Jim Keith, he was all into this stuff and writing. He wrote like 45 books on conspiracies and stuff. And he fell off a stage at Burning Man and hurt his knee. And they rushed him to the Washoe County Hospital, where he died in surgery from a blood clot apparently that went from his leg and lodged in his lung and killed him. And supposedly the secret government killed him. If you follow, like some parapolitical researchers, that the secret government killed him. By putting an air bubble in there or something. But what's very interesting, so that happened, and then within about a year or so, his publisher, pictured there on the left, Ron Bonds, another friend of mine he used to buy the books from, he ended up dead. He went out to eat at his favorite Mexican restaurant in Atlanta, and ended up with food poisoning or something. He was dead in like 18 hours. He was dead. The guy who published Jim Keith's book. And so, the universe has an interesting way of correcting things sometimes. And I've heard of like remote viewers who are like on the leading edge and they die in some freak car accident. It's like the other side. There is another side, folks. I don't know how much you investigate the mind and where we'll all go after all this stuff. But anyway, so let's move on. Here we got Gary Webb. Anybody know who Gary Webb is? He wrote an article in the San Jose Weekly News, I believe it was, or Daily News, about crack cocaine and how the CIA was basically creating the crack cocaine epidemic. And CIA chemists that were actually the ones that developed the process for developing crack by adding the baking soda and firing it and heating it and melting it and blowing houses up and stuff. And so this is the guy that broke all that whole story. Gary Webb, rest in peace. He ended up dead a few years ago. He 2 gunshot wounds to the head. One, I guess, wasn't good enough.